The feeling that we belong and that others respect us for who we are is priceless. There is nothing more central to our emotional well-being than that feeling. When Fred Rogers started Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he wanted children to feel the security that comes from others' respect and mostly from the love for themselves. This year, a documentary and movie and the works about his life is bringing the messages that he had back to America 50 years after he started the show. He said, "Those who would try to make you feel less than you are, that is the greatest evil in the world." Mr. Rogers demonstrated an antidote to this evil in a conversation with a child about quieting self-doubt. "I wonder if I'm a mistake." "You are no mistake. I think you are fine just the way you are. The way I look, the way I talk, yes, I love you just the way you are." On this night of awe, as we reflect on our life, examining our deeds before the true judge, we return to simple truths because we know them, but we find them hard to really believe and act upon at times. Treat yourself with respect, others with dignity. Love your neighbor as yourself. Yes, many of you might be saying, "I think I'm pretty good at this, thank you very much. And even though our society seems broken in its moral convictions, I still have my values squared away." It is not so simple. None of us is immune. Before the flood, Noah was honored by God for being righteous in his generation. Was his generation's depravity the moral ruler by which to measure? We may hope a new generation is simply going to know how to be good, how to do the right things, to demonstrate derech eretz, good behavior, but it won't be assuming that it's going to happen. It is going to be by modeling, talking, countering negative images and messages and teaching. It will be for parents and caring adults to help their kids turn off their devices and to look into their faces with compassion and to say, "You are good just who you are. You are worthy of dignity." Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv spent the last decade of his life in Kelm, Lithuania, teaching a few close disciples who would eventually spread the Musar movement throughout Europe and beyond. This was in the late 19th century. He came to be known as the Alter, or Elder of Kelm. In the month of Elul, in the month preceding the High Holy Days, Rabbi Simcha Zissel posted a public notice on the door of the Kelm Talmud Torah. All the people in town would pass by this Talmud Torah on the way to market, as they went about their day-to-day behavior and business in the hustle and bustle of life. And they would read these words: "We have not yet prepared ourselves to do what is essential. And so we must accept upon ourselves the work of loving people and of unity. With this, one's path will slowly improve. And in any event, one will already have turned a little bit toward repentance." Rabbi Simcha Zissel's message is as urgent and necessary in the 21st century as it is in the 19th. But this is a simple message. And in truth, this is a simple sermon. But it is not easy. We cannot pretend that loving our neighbor as ourselves has ever been easy. We might think nostalgically that Mr. Rogers lived in the good old days when such public values were clear, but good values have always been under assault. Mr. Rogers did what he did because he felt decency was not obvious in his day. Children were exposed to footage of the Vietnam War and violent protests and morally questionable behaviors of the 60s. Mr. Rogers dropped out of seminary in his senior year to go into television. He worked with the brightest child development psychologists of the day on how to inculcate a new generation in the value of dignity, self-worth. In the Jewish spiritual character development tradition of Musar, this attribute of dignity is called kavod. Kavod comes from the Hebrew root for weightiness. Each of us has gravitas, matter that counts. Kavod means dignity and respect and honor. Above me on the sanctuary wall are the 10 Commandments. On the right side bottom is the 5th. Kabed et avicha ve'et amecha, honor your father and your mother. The rabbis teach that this honor is not when you are a child, but when you are grown up and your parents attain old age. That is when you might not feel your parents' weight in your life. That is when we must honor them. Dignity comes not from what we might have done in our lives or with our lives. Our kavod derives fully from our humanity. Every person deserves it. And we all know why. Our inherent value comes from our being created in God's image. Knowing this was a sure bellwether for good behavior than even the golden rule, according to a teacher in our tradition known as Ben Azai. It was none other than Rabbi Akiva who disagreed, saying that the greatest principle in Torah was love your neighbor as yourself. Ben Azai never attained the ranks of being called a rabbi 2 millennia ago, but he had the temerity to stand up to Rabbi Akiva. He knew that our sense of self-worth is most important. It comes from knowing that we are B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, descended from the same parent, Adam. As in many arguments, Ben Azai was right and Rabbi Akiva was right. Ben Azai's contemporary was Ben Zoma, who too was one of the most famous teachers in the Talmud, though he died before he became rabbi. He is known for distilling the theology of creation into short questions and answers. He asks, who is honored? Ezehu mechubad. The answer may seem obvious because likely it is because we've heard it before, but it is brilliant. Who is honored? The one who honors others. When he asks that question, who is honored, Ben Zoma does not mean who is made dignified by other people, as is the common understanding. What value is there in being dependent on other people giving you dignity? Rather, as the Slonim Rabbi teaches, this statement means that the gaze of one person to another is like glancing into the mirror. If his face is dirty, he will see in the mirror a dirty face. So it is the same when a person looks at another person. The amount that he is pure and refined internally, so he will look more generously upon the other and see good attributes. On the other hand, if he is infected with bad attributes and behavior, he will see bad attributes in everyone else. And therefore, the truly dignified person is the one who treats all people with dignity, who appreciates all people. This behavior is the great sign that he is dignified himself. When you appreciate your inherent self-worth, then you can love your neighbor. Fred Rogers never forgot how vulnerable it is being a child. He wanted to heal the wounds of childhood, to heal all those anxieties. When he testified to Congress in 1969 about funding for public television, he managed to succeed because he spoke straight to the hearts of the senators with simple truths. We are dealing with the inner drama of childhood, he said. I tell the children at the end of every show, there is no one in the world like you, and I like you just the way you are. If we can make feelings mentionable and manageable, we would have done a great service for mental health. And then Mr. Rogers reflected, I'm constantly worried about what our children are seeing. I'm trying to present a meaningful expression of care. And he shared then a song that honors feelings, legitimates them so that they can be given a voice and managed in ways that will actually help our society and all of our neighborhoods. What do you do with the mad that you feel? And he said that this line came straight from a kid. What do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole world seems so wrong and nothing you do seems very right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends from a game of tag, or do you see how fast you can go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish. I can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. Let me tell you, the chairman of that committee, Senator Pastore, responded to Mr. Rogers, I got goosebumps, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. And Mr. Rogers, you just earned yourself $20 million. Why did this work? Why did Chairman Pastore, a tough senator from Rhode Island, feel goosebumps listening to Mr. Rogers? It is because at the root of everything is a desire for dignity, for kavod. We feel that dignity stripped from us so many times a day. We allow others to control our sense of self-worth, and when it's removed, we feel shame. There's a story about Rabbi Akiva Eiger, who had guests at his Shabbat table, one of them who accidentally knocked over a glass of wine, and the other guests were horrified, watching the wine spread across the white tablecloth. The Rebbe, seeing the embarrassment on his friend's face, swiftly knocked over his own glass and said, "The table, it must be crooked." As philosopher Moshe Halbertal teaches, shame gets to two core issues: the mental suffering that we may feel in that moment, and the real or perceived diminishment of our social standing. We Jews get this. It is in our stories and in our lived experiences. French jurist and Holocaust survivor René Cassin has been called the father of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed into law in the same year that Israel became a state. Sesson was honored for his role with the Nobel Peace Prize, and his preamble to the Declaration opens in dignity. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. That's how it opens. Human rights start with the recognition of inherent dignity of all members of the human family. Kavod can be inherent, it can be offered freely like love, and it can also be stripped away. Aretha Franklin's song, Respect, became an empowering battle cry for the civil rights movement and the women's movement when kavod was not freely given. It was originally written and sung by Otis Redding, but it was Aretha's life. And the way she imbued every letter of that R-E-S-P-E-C-T with meaning that broke open America's heart. From her mouth, calling for respect was no hope. It was a demand. In Hebrew, we call that a mitzvah, a sacred obligation. My friend, Rabbi Zoe Klein, recently wrote about a new book by Donna Hicks called Leading with Dignity: How to Create a Culture That Brings Out the Best in All People. Hicks has worked extensively on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well as conflicts around the world. In her work on conflict resolution, Hicks discovered, according to Rabbi Klein, that what is of utmost importance to us as human beings is how we feel about how we are. Her research shows that we are just as programmed to sense a threat to our dignity as we are to sense a physical threat against us. According to Hicks, we don't have to respect each other's opinions for conflict resolution. What we have to do is protect each other's dignity. On this Yom Kippur, as we confess our sins, let us also confess our promises. We will protect dignity when we don't play the game of name-calling and put-downs. We will protect kavod when we look into our neighbor's eyes and smile. We will protect dignity when we truly feel the sacred weight of each person's being and honor their feelings. We will protect kavod when we, like Yossi Klein Halevi said to his Palestinian neighbor, I want to hear your story. We will protect dignity when we don't hold anyone to the first thing that they say, when we give anyone the benefit of the doubt, when we stay curious. And we will protect kavod when our actions and speech do not demean or hurt based on someone's looks, their sexuality, their gender, or their opinion. This is not complicated, but it is not as easy as we hope. It takes consistent effort, the risk of uncomfortable conversations, calling out violations of dignity lovingly but clearly. It takes remembering to practice small improvements in our reactions. We will not succeed all the time, nobody does. But we can become more prone to success with effort. Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv, the altar of Kelm, encourages us just in this direction. Living a life of kavod is a lifetime practice. He says it is the work of a lifetime, and that's why we've been given exactly a lifetime in which to do it. Fred Rogers was interviewed shortly after 9/11, when newscasters were looking for living symbols of being a good neighbor. He said, we are called to be tikkun olam, repairers of creation. He really did say that, tikkun olam. Thank you for whatever you do, he said, wherever you are, to bring joy and light and hope and faith and pardon and love to your neighbor and to yourself. May we be such a neighbor, recognizing our own self-worth so that we can help all feel their inherent dignity. Ken Yehi Ratzon.